We are at the Bok Sports Centrum in Budapest, Hungary, and it's the start of the 7th round. Gukesh is coming in. There are so many fans who want a picture or autograph with him. Of course, all that is on Gukesh's mind is his next round game. But the youngster doesn't want to disappoint his fans, so he does the autographs, he takes the pictures, but he knows that this is one of the most crucial rounds of the Chess Olympiad 2024. He's going to take on China, and on the top board, Ding Liren, his world championship opponent, is not going to turn up. It's Wei Yi who is actually going to play on board number 1, and Gukesh there still signing autographs, and at some point he picks up pace as he tries to enter in to the playing hall. So many people want to just have a moment with him. He's after all the world championship challenger, and there you have Gukesh now seated opposite Wei Yi. Ding Liren decided to take a rest, and so it's Wei Yi who's going to sit opposite Gukesh, and Wei Yi is actually in tremendous form. He won the Tata Steel Masters, he's done well at the Grand Chess Tour, and now this is going to be an amazing clash between Gukesh and Wei Yi. Let's see what Gukesh opens with. He starts off with 1e4. And Wei Yi responds back with the Sicilian. That's the most exciting opening out there, which clearly shows that Wei Yi wants to fight today. Knight comes out to f3, d6 played, and will Gukesh play the open Sicilian with d4? No, he first brings out his knight to c3, he plays his knight out to f6. Wei Yi is a big exponent of the Najdorf, so after take a6 is the Najdorf, but Gukesh goes bishop e2. He just wants a fresh position, and now Wei Yi says it's too late to play d4 and I'm going to play e5, clamping down the position. Gukesh moves his bishop to c4, losing a tempo, but saying to Wei Yi that look, your d5 square is weak and I'm going to control it with my bishop. Bishop comes out to e7. Black is looking to finish his development and castle. Gukesh plays d3, opening up his other bishop. And now the knight comes out to c6. White plays bishop to g5, threatening the knight on f6. And then the main point here is that Gukesh wants to take control of the d5 square, which is why he may even trade right now on f6 totally unprovoked, and he does it. He takes, bishop takes f6, and now the d5 square is slightly weakened, but you know, it's very normal to play this way. Bishop f6, and even if you are able to plonk your knight, it's no big deal. He brings his knight to d5. For the time being, white hasn't committed with his king yet. Bishop comes out to e6. It could go to the short side, it could go to the long side. We do not know. Gukesh plays his queen to d2. Maybe one of the ideas is to stop the bishop from coming to g5. And now a6 played by Wei Yi, a very logical move to expand with b5. You can play a4 and stop the move b5, but Gukesh doesn't intend to do anything about it. He simply short castles. Wei Yi now pushes his pawn to b5, and Gukesh will be dropping his bishop back. He plays it back to b3. Black's position out of the opening is quite comfortable if you ask me, and here king h8 is played. And now a3. Gukesh could have also played a4, striking at the queen side, but he decides to keep it simple with a3. Maybe later he'll put his bishop back on a2 and play b4. Rook b8 played here by the Chinese grandmaster, and now Gukesh plays his pawn to h3. So the game is developing pretty slowly, but now a very important moment, g6 played here by Wei Yi, and I think Gukesh should seriously think about taking here on f6 because the bishop plans to go back to g7. Gukesh doesn't do that. He plays c3 and Wei Yi quietly moves his bishop back, threatening f5, opening up the rook. Gukesh moves his bishop backwards. Maybe his plan is to play b4 here. f5 played. Now this is definitely an important moment. I think Gukesh should go knight b4, attacking the bishop and the knight, and after bishop d7 just take and trade off, and it's equal. But he goes knight g5. He attacks the bishop. Wei Yi puts his bishop back to g8. And he takes on f5. All of a sudden, black has a huge advantage now. G takes f5. Fantastic move there. And now black has this huge center. Gukesh plays f4. And now just kicking away this knight. h6, knight f3. Take here. And then knight e7 followed by e4 and d5 gives black an amazing position. But instead, he goes c4, Gukesh takes it, Wei Yi takes back. It's a pawn sacrifice that the Chinese GM has made here, takes here on c4, but the rook has now opened up. And he takes on f4. This is not a great idea. e4 or knight a5 followed by e4 would have been much better. After e takes f4, you can see that the knight is hanging, but Gukesh can simply bring his knight back to f3. He does it. Knight comes back to f3 and he is totally better here now. Gukesh from an inferior position has come to a great position in a matter of just couple of moves. The tension is riding high on this game. Now Gukesh has clear advantage. Move the bishop back to a2. Yes, he plays his bishop back here. If you take here, I'm simply going to take back with my bishop. So he plays knight b3, forking there. Gukesh takes, rook takes, and now a good move is rook f2, defending the b2 pawn. The pawn is weak, but instead Gukesh takes here on f4, and maybe he's missed Wei Yi's next sequence. Check, attacking here, giving a check. Rook f2 is forced. He plays rook f2, and now rook to b8. And the plan is to simply chop off this pawn. It's impossible to defend it with rook b1 because of bishop takes c3, and so he plays rook to d1, and they're going to be mass trades now. Rook takes b2. Gukesh takes the rook. Wei Yi takes it back. Rook takes. Rook takes, and Gukesh chops off the pawn. The position is almost equal here, and the interesting thing to note is that the other three games are also very close to being drawn. In fact, Prague has already drawn, so maybe a 2-2 score is very likely between India and China. But Gukesh has right now pinned the bishop. He takes this on c3, but Gukesh goes knight d5, and his threat is to win the bishop and later on play knight e7 to win here. Check. Maybe that's the only defense here. He wants to come and pin this. King f2 and rook d1. But what has been missed here, or maybe not missed, but Wei Yi might have assessed it in his favor, or at least thought it's equal, is rook takes g8, king takes, and now the other bishop falls. So white has two knights for the rook, but in this position it's very difficult to win, because firstly the a3 pawn is weak. If you lose it, I have a passer here, knight comes to b5. The good news for white is that he can use his knights to protect each other, and this knight protects the pawn, so it's all very stable. But the reason why white cannot claim an advantage is because once you have the stability, you need someone to come and attack the pawn on a5, and this king is too far and this rook is too active attacking on the other side. For now, Gukesh hits the rook, rook gives a check, king comes up, and now black king also comes up to f6. The knight jumps to d6, maybe threatening the pawn on f5 here. He goes rook c3, attacking the pawn on a3. The a3 pawn is extremely important, and so Gukesh comes back with his knight, defending the pawn, also attacking the rook. The rook goes back to c1. And now maybe Gukesh can move his king up the board bit by bit. Gukesh is trying to make some progress here, because two knights are extremely tricky. Rook comes to g1, attacking the pawn on g2. And king comes back, attacking the rook now. The rook has to move away. He goes to rook c1. And now knight e2 played. What's the new setup that Gukesh is trying to take here? Oh, I get it. He wants to bring his other knight back here to c3 and pawn to a4. That's his plan. Wei Yi attacks the knight, but now Gukesh can get his plan rolling now with knight c3 and pawn to a4. Because with the knights on, yes, he does that. With the knights here, it's much more difficult for the rook to attack the g2 pawn. Rook comes to b3, attacking the pawn on a3. And Gukesh pushes his pawn. It also fixes the black pawn on a5. Now the tension's rising up. Already we have had 3 draws in this game. It is all hinging on Gukesh versus Wei Yi. So Gukesh continues. He knows that if he wins this game, he will give India a very important victory against China. Rook b6 played. The position still roundabout even. King e3. The margin of error keeps reducing. Now the rook comes to b4. Let's see how Gukesh continues next. He plays his king to d3. It's all about making those one move at a time. h6 by Wei Yi, and you will see that perhaps a small chance will present itself if you keep making those moves. King e3, still waiting. And now he hits the knight so that it's pinned here. Brings his king to d3. The only way to make progress is to remove the king from e5. And there you have the rook going back. And the only way to do that is to give a check to the king. And that's the reason why Gukesh goes knight g1. His plan now is to go knight f3 check. And he plays his rook to b8. Already some progress being made. Knight f3 check. The king has to go backwards now. King d6 might be a good option, but then knight d4 attacks f5. So Wei Yi keeps the king closer. He plays king f6. And now knight d4. If you play king e5, there's a fork looming large there with the knight, so you can't go there. Rook d8, pinning the knight. Wei Yi is a tough nut to crack here. King c4 is met with a check again. He goes king e3. Rook goes to c8. And he comes back to d3. Again rook d8. Gukesh down to 6 minutes on the clock. Wei Yi has 7 minutes. Knight comes back to e2. Now the a4 pawn is slightly weak, and so Wei Yi again goes to b8 with the idea of rook b4. And Gukesh goes knight f4. He's taking on the fight now. Now rook b4 impossible because of a check and a fork. So rook b1 played. And now a check. Are the knights weaving their magic here? It's so tough for even Wei Yi to play this because the knights can be forking from all directions. The knight comes back to c3. Now the rook is attacked. And he moves the rook to h1, attacking the pawn on h3. Gukesh gives a check. And now king. Where does the king go? He moves his king to d6, which is a good square. King d6. The position is equal, but not at all drawish. h4 played. And Wei Yi finds another fantastic move, attacking the pawn on g3. You have to save it. Maybe knight e2 is the right move. Yes. And the thing is, now black has this very nice move f4. The reason why this is strong is because after gf4, f3 hangs, and after knight f4, g3 hangs. He goes knight g1, rook h1, and he takes on f4. Rook takes h4. Knight moves up slowly and steadily. Now the game has become more complex because black has the h pawn, white has the f pawn. It does feel that the h pawn might be stronger because the king can take care of the f pawn. Will the two knights create some problem there? h5. Wei Yi starts pushing his own pawn. Gukesh goes knight to c3. He wants to put his knight on e4. h4 seems like the logical way to continue. And Wei Yi does push the pawn. 1 minute 12 seconds for Wei Yi. Just 2 minutes for Gukesh. He gives a check. And now very important to play king d7 because king e7 check. Yes, he finds it king d7 because now f6 doesn't come with a check. You can push h3. Knight e5 check by Gukesh. King d8 played. And maybe now f6. The only defensive move is rook d1 check. Very difficult to find because king e2 you want to play rook d5. He goes h3 and this is a mistake. But it's not at all easy to know that it's a mistake because now Gukesh can push the pawn to f7. And after f7, king e7, you go knight g5. Yes, f7 played. If king e7, which is important now, oh, he brings his rook to f1. But the problem now is that I go knight g5. And although the h pawn is about to queen, in comes a knight to break the coordination here. Knight f3. And if you make a queen, I will make a queen and checkmate you before that. So he plays his king to e7. And now Gukesh manages just in the nick of time to take the pawn. Wow, that's just amazing. But Wei Yi goes after the other pawn. If he can win the a4 pawn and then sacrifice his rook for the f7 pawn, it's a draw because two knights cannot checkmate a lone king. Check. And now a very important moment. King d2 is the must move because if king e2 there is rook a4 and rook e4 check. And he finds it. King d2 is just absolutely brilliant because after rook takes a4, now knight h6. An important move to be found once again to defend the pawn, threatening knight g6. That's absolutely correct. Now f4 is inaccessible because of check and you lose it. rook a2, and now you realize the importance of the king on d2. It can go to e3, controlling the f2 square. That was deep, and actually Gukesh found it with roughly a minute on his clock, which is just unbelievable. Wei Yi gives another check, but now after king e4 and f5, if the king moves ahead, knight g6 leads to an unstoppable queen. Wow, what a turnaround this has been, and Gukesh wins. Look at him there. He pumps himself up and he says, good job. Srinath comes and pats him on the back. Team India beats China. What an encounter this was. Perhaps one of the finest endgame displays of Gukesh's career, and considering the stressful situation that he was in, is just brilliant. I also love how Wei Yi immediately starts talking about the game and also asking questions, and Gukesh is very interested in it. This is sportsmanship at the highest level, because India and China, definitely two of the strongest countries in the chess world right now, and such a big encounter ends in India's favor, and Wei Yi is very calm and asks about the moves, and that is just brilliant. But Gukesh leading from the front and giving India that much needed 1 point so as to beat China, and now India are the sole leaders in the open section by a gap of 1 point over Iran, and they have really great chances to win the gold medal this time with just 4 rounds to go. Gukesh, as is customary for him, puts back all the pieces, and so does Wei Yi, and this was an amazing game. I hope you enjoyed it. If you did, leave a comment below.